The early spring wind rattled the shutters of Caleb Monroe's modest home in Hamilton Ridge, a sleepy town nestled among the evergreens of upstate New York. Retired now, his life had slowed to a crawl. Early mornings brewing black coffee, long walks with his golden retriever Max, and nights spent listening to the creaks of a house that had too much silence. It gnawed at the edges, just like the memory of Eva, his daughter, who had vanished in the summer of 2005. Eva was 19 then, full of life, art, and rebellion. She was meant to fly to Paris for a summer art residency. Her dream. Her last call to him had been from JFK Airport. She'd laughed, promised to text when she landed, and ended with her usual, "Love you, old man." That was the last time he heard her voice. No arrival, no messages, no trace. Caleb had begged, pleaded, and raged through the channels he once trusted, the airline, the embassy, even old flying buddies with federal connections. But Flight 826 showed no record of Eva Monroe on the manifest. Authorities called it a runaway case. Jade Kim, Eva's best friend and roommate, insisted she'd seen Eva board. That was the only piece of truth he had, and even that was paper thin. Until today. It was Max who barked first when the mail slot clinked sharply against the wood. Caleb, still in his robe, shuffled over and bent to pick up the bundle. Junk, bills, a charity flyer, and one envelope, no return address, no postmark. Just his name scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. Something about it stopped him. He turned it over, weighing it in his palm. Not thick, but heavy, like it knew what it carried. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, heart suddenly loud in his ears. He slid a steak knife under the flap and opened it. Inside, a single sheet of glossy paper fell out. A boarding pass. Eva Monroe, Flight 826, Seat 17A. Departure, JFK June 3, 2005. Destination, Charles de Gaulle, Paris. Boarding time, 6:20 p.m. Caleb's hands trembled. He squinted, flipping it over. There it was, the barcode, the seal of North Atlantic Skyways, even a faint smudge of what looked like airport grease. But one thing chilled him. It had never been scanned, no gate stamp, no validation. This was the original ticket, untouched, unused, as if she had never boarded. He raced to the den, tore open the filing cabinet he hadn't touched in years. His Eva file, every photo, article, email, and printout was still there, including the final airline report. He flipped through until he found it. Flight 826, passenger manifest, Monroe, Eva, not listed. He sank into the chair, forehead in his hand. The report had always contradicted Jade's story. Jade said Eva boarded. The airline said otherwise. Now this boarding pass arrived, proof she was supposed to be on that flight, but wasn't. He lifted the envelope again, inspecting the inside. No note, no explanation, just that ticket, like a ghost from a life frozen in time. The phone rang. He flinched, letting it ring twice before answering. "Monroe, Dad?" It was his son, Ben. Caleb tried to focus, masking the shake in his voice. "You okay?" Ben asked. "You sound—" "A lot on my mind," Ben paused. "You thinking about her again?" Caleb hesitated. "I never stopped." Ben sighed. "It's been 17 years. Maybe it's time to stop reopening wounds." "I'm not reopening anything," Caleb said quietly. "But someone else just did." He hung up without explaining. The boarding pass lay on the table like a relic from a parallel universe. One question thundered in his mind. If Eva never boarded, where the hell did she go? That night, sleep didn't come easy. Caleb stared at the ceiling, turning over the impossible. Who had this ticket? Why send it now? What had really happened that day at JFK? The next morning he sat down with his laptop and searched for Flight 826. The flight had indeed departed on June 3, 2005 at 7:03 p.m. Arrived on time, no reported issues, North Atlantic Skyways operated it. He kept digging, but when he tried to pull passenger records, they were gone. The airline had gone under in 2006, he discovered. No digital archives remained online. Curious. He picked up the phone and dialed the only number he could find, a contact listed under North Atlantic's Bank Street trustee. A robotic voice answered. North Atlantic Skyways files are now managed by Axion Holdings. Please leave a message. He left a brief, urgent note with a callback number, then leaned back, tension twisting his stomach. The boarding pass lay beside him. He touched the name printed on it with his fingertips. Eva Monroe. Still real. Still missing. He couldn't help the thought that followed. Was Jade lying all along? The boarding pass wouldn't leave Caleb's mind. It sat on the kitchen table through the night, like an accusation. By morning, sunlight exposed every fingerprint he'd left on the glossy surface. He stared at it while sipping lukewarm coffee, wondering how something so simple, a rectangle of paper, could detonate 17 years of silence. The call to Axion Holdings hadn't been returned. He didn't expect it to be. Corporations don't move for retired pilots with ghosts. But he wasn't just a retiree. He'd flown for 30 years, some of them under contracts no civilian ever read about. He still knew a few people, at least he hoped he did. He reached for his phone and pulled up the last saved number for Marcus Trent, a former FAA liaison now teaching aviation law in Boston. Caleb hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. "Caleb?" Marcus answered, his voice still clipped and alert. "Damn, it's been years. You good?" Caleb didn't waste time. "I need access to a manifest. Flight 826, June 3, 2005, North Atlantic Skyways. Any archived logs, passenger lists, incident notes?" There was a pause. North Atlantic went under. Their digital logs were bought out and sealed. Post 9/11 classification. A lot of those companies got absorbed. "What's this about?" Caleb hesitated. "My daughter, Eva, she was supposed to be. The boarding pass just showed up at my house yesterday. 17 years later." Silence stretched through the phone line. "Jesus," Marcus finally said. "That's the girl that vanished, right?" Caleb nodded to no one. "I need someone inside Axion, or anyone who has access to the data." Marcus exhaled. "Give me a few hours. I know a guy who used to scrub audit logs for them." Caleb hung up and stared again at the pass. The ink was pristine. It hadn't aged like the rest of the world had. While he waited, he printed a scan of the ticket and took it to the only computer shop in town. "Can you tell me if this printer ink is recent?" he asked the teenager behind the counter, who blinked twice before agreeing. "I mean, yeah, I can run a spectrum analysis. Might take a couple hours." Caleb left the boy with the image and walked the length of the main street, trying to clear his mind. He passed the post office, the church, and the little bakery Eva used to beg him to stop at. Every building seemed to whisper her name. His phone buzzed around noon. Marcus. "I got something," he said without introduction. "I talked to a guy who helped digitize the North Atlantic logs after their bankruptcy. He remembers Flight 826. Here's the thing, there was one unlisted female on that flight. No ticket match, no ID. Internal memo listed it as a post 9/11 security deletion." Caleb's heart raced. What does that mean? Means she was scrubbed. Could have been a clerical error or intentional concealment. They logged her as unidentified female passenger, seat 17A, and flagged it for audit. But the audit never happened. It was dismissed when Axion took over. Caleb swallowed hard. "That's Eva's seat," Marcus continued. "North Atlantic's records got moved to a private server in 2007. Not even the FAA has full access anymore, but my guy sent me a metadata tag. Her entry was there, then deleted in late 2006 during the data migration. Someone didn't want her listed." Caleb thanked him and ended the call. His breath caught in his throat. 17 years of nothing, and now 2 contradictions. A tag that existed, and a log that was erased. Someone had made sure Eva disappeared on paper. But why? He returned to the tech shop. The teenager handed him a printout. "This ink? Less than a year old, probably printed within the last 6 months. Whatever this is, it ain't 17 years old." Caleb nodded slowly. That meant someone had kept the boarding pass, then printed it recently and mailed it. Why now? And who still had access to such an old files from the 2005 investigation? He combed through police statements, media clippings, even voice recordings. Jade Kim's interview transcript was there. She had sworn Eva boarded, said she watched her walk down the jet bridge. That had been his only comfort all these years. But now he knew. There was no record of her going through the gate. Her seat was reassigned as an unidentified female and then erased. Jade's story no longer aligned. She needed to talk to her again. He opened Facebook, searched for Jade Kim. A profile popped up. Married name now, Jade Kim Hartley. 2 children, a home in Albany. He stared at the screen, debating. She had a life now, but she also had answers. Before messaging her, Caleb dug deeper into North Atlantic skyways. Buried in a PDF on a defunct aviation watchdog forum was a thread about irregularities during their bankruptcy. The thread mentioned bulk data sales to 3 buyers, including one named Ventricore Solutions. Caleb copied the name. He checked incorporation records. Ventricore had merged with a European firm in 2007. The European firm was connected to a non-nerve called Eros Foundation. Caleb froze. That name was vaguely familiar. He remembered it from Eva's study abroad application. The sponsoring program had been Eros. His gut turned. It wasn't just about the airline. The whole system, ticketing, student programs, international movement, was connected. Someone had forged her study abroad file and planted her on a flight with no digital record. And now, after all this time, they were leaving breadcrumbs. He looked again at the boarding pass. It wasn't just a memory, it was bait. Whoever sent it wanted him to dig. He would dig until he hit bone. Caleb didn't sleep. His body had grown accustomed to long nights during his flying years, but this insomnia came from a different altitude, one that twisted the gut instead of the air. He sat at the edge of his couch, the cursor blinking on Jade Kim Hartley's Facebook page. She was smiling in her profile photo, one arm around a tall man in glasses, 2 kids in front of them, both dressed in Halloween costumes. A normal life, a life unburdened, at least on the surface. Caleb clicked message, then hesitated. What would he even say? That the past had cracked open? That the lie she told 17 years ago now had teeth? He didn't type anything. He drove, instead. Albany was 4 hours out, but the movement gave his thoughts somewhere to sit. He pulled off the highway before noon, turning onto a quiet residential street lined with sycamores. The house was blue, the lawn uneven. There were chalk drawings on the driveway, dragons and rainbows. He parked 2 doors down and walked up the steps like a man heading into a storm. He knocked twice. No answer. He knocked again, and this time the door opened a crack. Jade's face appeared behind it. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, touched with gray at the temples. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Caleb?" she asked, voice thin. What are you doing here?" He held up the boarding pass. "This showed up at my house 3 days ago." She didn't move, didn't speak. Her face went pale. He added, "You said you saw Eve aboard, that she went through the gate, that she got on the plane." Jade stepped back and opened the door fully. "You should come in." Her house smelled like cinnamon and dryer sheets. A cartoon played in the background, barely audible. She led him into the kitchen and poured coffee without asking. "I lied," she said finally, setting the cup down in front of him. "I didn't see her board. I saw her walk toward the terminal, but I never followed. I panicked when she went missing. I didn't know what to say. The police were everywhere, so I lied. I said she boarded." Caleb stared at her, every joint in his body locking into place. "Why?" Jade looked down at her hands. "Because she told me not to watch, that she'd meet me in Paris, that if anything happened, I should stay quiet. I didn't understand at the time. I thought she was being dramatic, but something scared her." Caleb leaned forward. "You never told the police about that." Jade nodded, ashamed. "I didn't want them to think I helped her disappear." "I didn't help her. I swear." "But a few years later, I got this." She opened a drawer and took out a worn postcard. It was dated 2008. A camel and sand dune were printed on the front, the words Casablanca, Morocco in the top corner. The message was scrawled in blue ink. "I'm alive. Don't tell anyone." Caleb read it 3 times. His fingers trembled. "Did you ever trace it?" Jade shook her head. "I didn't want to. I thought it meant she was safe. I had just gotten married. I buried it." Caleb pocketed the postcard. "I need to know everything she said to you that week. Everything strange." Jade exhaled. She was different. She started locking her bedroom door. Said she started someone following her on campus. Kept her phone off at night. Eros, I think. Said she had a weird meeting with them about overseas placements. But she never told me what happened. Caleb remembered that name from the boarding pass lead. The dots were connecting, but the picture was still buried. Did she mention any names? Only once, Jade replied, closing her eyes. Victor, she said. If anything happens, it's because of Victor. That's all she gave me. Caleb repeated the name under his breath. He had never heard it before this week, and now it had come up twice, from separate trails. He stood to leave, his head clouded with more questions than he arrived with. Caleb, Jade said softly, if she's still out there, please don't blame her. She was trying to survive. He didn't respond. He walked out into the cold afternoon with the postcard in his jacket, the image of Eva's last known message burning like sunlight through fog. Caleb drove through the night with the postcard on the passenger seat and Eva's name bouncing in his chest like a heartbeat he hadn't heard in 17 years. The revelations from Jade played on a loop in his head. Eva didn't board the flight. Eva was scared. Eva sent a message from Morocco. The name Victor pulsed like a code he didn't know how to crack. He didn't go home. Instead, he checked into a motel just off I-87, unable to stand the silence of his house with Eva's teenage laughter still echoing faintly in its corners. At 6:17 a.m., his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, international, and he nearly let it go to voicemail. But something in his gut told him to answer. Mr. Monroe? A man's voice asked, tinged with a French accent. This is Officer Luke Perrin with French Customs and Border Surveillance. Are you the father of Eva Monroe? Caleb sat up, heart hammering. Yes, who gave you this number? Interpol liaison from New York. I believe you've been inquiring about old records. Something has surfaced. Caleb gripped the phone tighter. Tell me? Officer Perrin cleared his throat. A local renovation crew found a buried hiking backpack near a long-abandoned private airstrip outside Nice. There were old airline tags and a passport in the lining. The name inside matched Eva Monroe. It appears the contents have been undisturbed since 2005. Caleb blinked hard, grounding himself with the motel desk lamp. Are you saying you found her things? Yes, monsieur. The passport is dated May 2005, and the backpack also contained a USB drive in a waterproof sleeve. There was no cash or phone. We've secured it all, but I thought you should know. Caleb's voice cracked. Is there any sign of her? Any indication she was hurt? No remains were found, just the bag, and the USB contains several encrypted files labeled Journal. Some are readable in English. Send them, all of them, please. Caleb booked a flight within the hour. He landed in Nice the following evening, jet-tagged and emotionally hollowed, but running on the kind of focus only a parent fueled by uncertainty could sustain. Officer Perrin met him at the station, a compact man in a rumpled blazer who handed him a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a dusty canvas backpack, navy blue with a faded college logo stitched near the zipper. Caleb's hands shook as he opened it. The fabric still smelled faintly of Eva's favorite lavender detergent. Her passport photos stared back at him, and he had to step away for a moment. Officer Perrin gave him a quiet room and a laptop to view the USB file. Caleb opened the first one. March 9, 2005. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but I've seen the same man 3 times near the English department. He wears a brown coat and sunglasses even when it rains. I thought he was a professor, but no one else seems to know him. Jade thinks I'm imagining it, but I'm not. Caleb scrolled faster, opening the next few entries. March 22, someone accessed my laptop. My folders were rearranged. Nothing taken, but I know what I saved where. My application for the Eros Foundation internship disappeared and then reappeared a day later. April 4th, I met with the program director from Eros today. Dr. Legrand. He asked a lot of questions that didn't feel academic. Wanted to know if I had any living relatives besides my dad. Asked if I had a boyfriend. Said the Paris placement would be perfect for someone like me, no baggage. I told him I changed my mind. He smiled too easily. My phone keeps losing signal when I leave campus. I'm not crazy. They know I know. I'm going to Paris anyway, but not through their program. Caleb pressed his fingers to his lips. His eyes burned, but he kept reading. The final entry was dated April 18. I bought a separate ticket. They'll think I'm going through Eros, but I'm not. I have to disappear long enough to find out who they really are. If I vanish, I want Dad to know I didn't go willingly. I'm scared. But if I stay, I'm dead. Caleb closed the laptop, his breath caught between panic and revelation. She hadn't run away. She had tried to protect herself. She had seen something, known something. The officer returned with a photo printout from the excavation site. The backpack had been buried near the edge of a rusted chain-link fence that bordered the airstrip, long overgrown with brush. The location suggests haste, Piran said. Someone wanted to hide it quickly. No other items were buried. It's like someone dumped it before boarding a different plane, or being forced onto one. Caleb traced the outline of the fence in the photo. Can you run prints? We've already submitted what we could. But time has degraded most of the evidence. The best lead now is the journal. Caleb spent 2 more days in Nice, walking the perimeter of the abandoned strip, taking in the empty tower and cracked pavement. No one had flown from there in nearly 15 years, but old fuel barrels still littered the field like forgotten warnings. The air tasted of rust and wind. On the last day, Perrin handed Caleb a redacted French intelligence report from 2006. This was filed during the investigation into the Eros Foundation's foreign activity. The name Victor Legrand appears here, suspected alias, linked to offshore accounts and a cargo manifest that originated from this very airstrip. Shipment listed humanitarian materials, but no cargo was found when agents arrived. Caleb stared at the name. Victor. The man Eva had feared, the man who'd possibly orchestrated her disappearance. The puzzle had pieces now. Eva's fear, her attempt to escape, the false internship, the hidden journal. But the image still blurred at the edges. Victor was no ghost. He had worked under a foundation now erased from public record. The deeper Caleb went, the colder the truth felt, like stepping into water that kept pulling him under. He boarded a flight back to New York with Eva's backpack clutched in his lap, unwilling to store it in the overhead bin. When the plane lifted off, he looked out the window and thought about the version of his daughter who walked toward a gate in 2005, never to be seen again. Not running, not hiding, fighting. Caleb returned to New York with Eva's backpack zipped shut beside him, the USB now safely duplicated, the original kept with French authorities. He hadn't slept properly in days, but adrenaline steered him. The moment the wheels hit the tarmac at JFK, he called Eva's old university and expressed a meeting with the current registrar, explaining he was reopening a personal matter involving a former student. The woman on the line paused when he gave Eva's name, then agreed to a meeting later that week. On the morning of the appointment, Caleb arrived on campus early and parked near the Arts Building. The walkways hadn't changed much since Eva's freshman year. Tulips lounged near the library stairs. Students lounged with earbuds, unaware of the ghost Kay saw at every corner. Eva in her blue hoodie. Eva with her backpack, laughing in the spring sunlight just like this. He met with Registrar Amanda Holt, a firm but polite woman in her 50s who welcomed him into her office with a neutral expression. Caleb handed her Eva's student ID number and sat quietly while she typed. You said your daughter was accepted into a study abroad program in 2005, correct? Yes, he said, eyes fixed on the screen. She was supposed to go to Paris, but she vanished. Holt frowned slightly. Well, this is odd, she murmured, querying. According to our records, Eva Monroe never applied to any of our partner programs. There's no formal request for study abroad, no faculty recommendation, no transcript release, nothing. Yet there is a withdrawal note dated April 15, 2005, citing international travel. That's not standard procedure. Caleb leaned forward. So who processed the withdrawal? She clicked deeper into the digital archive, brow furrowing. It was input by a visiting administrator from an external placement foundation. Let me see. Heroes Foundation, listed as an affiliated partner program but flagged as inactive since 2006. Caleb felt a chill crawl up the back of his neck. Do you have any documentation on that partnership? Holt pulled a thin manila folder from a lower drawer and opened it carefully. This is all we have. The agreement is sparse. 1 sheet of letterhead, a single signature, and no contact address. The official who signed the agreement on behalf of Eros was a Dr. Victor Legrand. It's the only program I've seen with such limited information. It was apparently a pilot initiative. She looked at Caleb with concern. You're telling me your daughter's entire international study record is forged? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Caleb said, gripping the armrests. She was lured in by this foundation under false pretenses, and now she's gone. Holt scanned the document again. There's an internal memo here dated 2007 after Eros was disbanded. It recommends the university discontinue any affiliation due to legal ambiguity and reputational risk. She handed him a copy of the file and added, "You might want to speak with someone from the International Affairs Department who worked here during that period. Try Professor Emiliano Warren. He was the liaison for external programs and may remember more." Caleb found Professor Warren's contact in the faculty directory and called immediately. The voice that answered was deep and slow, cautious at first, but thawed when Caleb explained who he was. "Eva Monroe," Warren said, repeating the name. Yes, I remember her." Quiet. "But something happened that semester. She came to see me once, said she didn't trust the man overseeing her file." "That must have been this Legrand," Caleb asked, pacing the lawn outside the registrar's office. Tall, French accent, mid-40s at the time, I think, wore suits too nice for academia. He wasn't like the others, too polished. He didn't ask the usual academic questions, more interested in the students' family situations. "I found a report about my discomfort, but nothing came of it." "Do you have a copy of that report?" "I believe I do. Hold on." Caleb listened to the hum of campus life around him, the clicking of bike gears, the distant hum of a lawnmower as he waited. Warren returned to the line a few minutes later, breathless. "Found it. Dated April 12, 2005. I noted that Legrand discouraged Eva from contacting her father about the trip. I thought it was strange, and she looked shaken after the meeting." Caleb's stomach turned. "Do you think he targeted students who lacked family connections?" "It's possible. Most of the Arrow's recruits came from isolated or under-supported backgrounds. They didn't want nosy parents or strong paper trails." Caleb thanked the professor and asked if he'd be willing to send the report and give a statement. Warren agreed without hesitation. Caleb spent the rest of the afternoon poring through archived newsletters and campus announcements. He found one small mention of Eros in the March 2005 bulletin, framed as an exclusive pilot program for interdisciplinary travel scholars. No photos, no list of participants, just a single quote attributed to Legrand. "We seek students with resilience, independence, and vision. Those who are ready to disappear from the ordinary." That last line stuck with Caleb like a splinter. Back at his motel, he laid out the documents he'd gathered: Eva's forged travel approval, the faculty memo, the professor's report, and the copy of the journal from the camp. A shape began to emerge from the chaos. Eros had existed, briefly and intentionally vague. Legrand had signed her out of school. Eva had caught on. She'd seen through the cracks and tried to get out. But someone or something had been faster. He searched for any trace of Eros Foundation online, but most of the links were dead or redirected to spam domains. He found a few articles in deep web archives referencing an international investigation into several shadowy organizations using educational fronts to traffic students. The name Eros appeared in one paragraph of a 2006 Europol summary, connected to a larger web of shell companies in Morocco, France, and Tunisia. Legrand's name wasn't listed officially, but one source mentioned an unidentified academic recruiter tied to suspicious exits from 3 universities across Europe and the United States. Caleb contacted a journalist whose byline appeared on the piece, a woman named Alina Desrosiers, and left a voicemail describing his search. Then he stared at the wall for a long time. Eva's back at his feet. There were more questions now. Why did Eros choose Eva? Was she the only one who escaped, or just the only one who tried? What did Legrand want with her? But the questions weren't enough. He needed faces, names, movement. Someone had built a system to make young women vanish without a trace, and they had nearly succeeded with Eva. She'd only slipped through because she fought her way out. The USB, the backpack, the decision to buy her own ticket. She had tried to disappear from the extraordinary, from something she sensed was not just dangerous, but engineered. And still, Legrand had found her. The next step was clear. He had to find out what happened to Eros after the shutdown. He had to follow the money, follow the aliases, follow the disappearances. And he had to find Victor Legrand, not the ghostly professor from a decade ago, but the man he had become. Caleb sat in a dim cafe near Hamilton Ridge, the contents of Eva's past spread across a laptop screen. He hadn't been home in weeks, and sleep felt more like a memory than a function. Since the discovery of the forged college documents and the Eros Foundation's involvement, his time had been consumed by tracking Victor Legrand. That name became both obsession and compass. There were no recent public records of anyone by that name working in education or international aid. The man had vanished from every system that Caleb could access. But people didn't just disappear. They reinvented themselves. One morning, Alina Desrosiers, the journalist Caleb had contacted, finally returned his call. Her voice was sharp, clipped with the rhythm of someone used to asking questions. "You're not the first person to dig into Eros," she said. "The first father. Most families never even realized what happened. Students dropped off the grid, and the foundation always had a trail of forged paperwork, excuses, accidents." Caleb asked what she knew about Legrand. Never had a confirmed identity. But there was a pattern. Where Eros set up a program, a certain academic consultant would appear. He used various names, always European, mid-40s, formal dress, fluent in 5 languages. The most recent credible sighting of someone matching his description was in upstate New York, working under the alias Dr. Victor Grinnell. He joined as a guest lecturer at Glenshaw College around 2018, taught sociology and international development. His contract ended abruptly in 2022, no formal termination notice. Caleb's pulse jumped. Glenshaw College was only 30 miles from Hamilton Ridge. "You think he's still in the area?" "If he is," Alina said, "he's laying low. But men like him don't stop what they're doing. They shift it, bury it deeper." Caleb thanked her and ended the call. Within an hour, he was parked outside the small liberal arts campus tucked between forests and rivers. Glenshaw looked peaceful, ivy-covered walls, quiet walkways, but Caleb had learned by now that evil didn't wear horns. It wore tweed and tenure. He walked into the main academic building and requested the personnel office. A secretary, too busy to ask questions, pointed him upstairs. Inside the office, Caleb introduced himself as an independent researcher working on a biography of international education leaders. He requested the file on Dr. Victor Grinnell. The administrator hesitated, but agreed to share publicly available data. The file contained Grinnell's resume, a few glowing letters of recommendation, and a faculty photo. Caleb's heart jolted when he saw it. The same high forehead, intense gaze, and subtle, polished smile. Older, but unmistakably Legrand. His listed degrees were from institutions that didn't exist anymore. His references were all from shuttered programs. Caleb copied the file with his phone, thanked the staff, and left. Outside, he scanned the photo again. If Legrand had resurfaced in academia, it meant he still needed access to minds, to talent, maybe to new victims. Caleb looked through recent campus publications. Grinnell had supervised an independent field study group that took students abroad every summer until the pandemic. Destinations included Tunisia, Morocco, southern France. Caleb circled the names of student participants and looked for any who had not returned. One name stood out, Marissa Glenn, a 20-year-old who had traveled with Grinnell in 2019 to a development conference in Tunis. Local newspapers published an obituary a year later, died in a boating accident off the coast of Sidi Bou Said. Body never recovered. No photos, no funeral date. Caleb tracked down her family in Maine. After a few phone calls and a long silence on the line, Marissa's mother agreed to meet him. Her home was weather-worn and quiet. Inside, she showed Caleb photos of her daughter, laughing, sun-kissed, full of ambition. "She wanted to change the world," her mother whispered. "Grinnell told us she died trying." Caleb asked if they'd ever received a death certificate. She hesitated. "Just a letter from the consulate. No official papers. We hired a private investigator in Tunisia. He couldn't find any accident report, just gaps. The story fit. Another disappearance, another lie." Caleb promised to stay in touch and left with a copy of Marissa's last known itinerary. Every breadcrumb kept pointing back to Grinnell. Caleb returned to Glenshaw's campus under the cover of dusk. He walked along the outer faculty housing rows until he found the address listed on Grinnell's HR file. It was a small cottage, half covered in moss. No lights. Mail overflowed from the box. Caleb approached cautiously, heart pounding, and knocked. No answer. He tried the knob. But the windows weren't. There were no personal photos, no decorations, just a bookshelf lined with academic texts, many in French. A worn leather briefcase sat in the corner. Caleb rifled through it and found note-coveted clothed initials in student profiles and a burner phone with one contact saved as V. He took photos of everything. In the upstairs bedroom, he found a locked cabinet. Burst it open with a letter opener. Inside were multiple passports, different names, same face. Caleb took the cabinet's contents, wrapped them in a hotel towel, and left before dark fully fell. That night, he laid everything out across the motel bed. Grinnell, whatever his name was, had built an identity machine. Fake degrees, fake credentials, real influence. Caleb turned on the burner phone, no signal, but it had a map app with a saved pin in southern Italy. He stared at it for a long time. Why Italy? He searched for NGO offices near the location and found a small refugee intake center in Cinque Terre, focused on youth asylum cases and maternal health. The name matched one he'd seen scribbled in Eva's journal. His heart stopped. Could this be a link to her? He sent the GPS image and the contents of the briefcase to Alina. She responded within the hour. This is real. The map connects to a known drop count for trafficked youth before they're moved deeper into Europe. We've been trying to prove someone used academic programs as the entry vehicle. You just gave us the proof. Caleb stared at the pin on the map, then at Eva's old boarding pass still tucked in his wallet. She had never intended to disappear. She had been made to. He packed his bag, loaded his car, and began the long drive toward the coast. The tires of Caleb's rental car kicked up dust as he arrived in Newark, New Jersey. A former airport worker named Ronelle Ortiz had reached out through Alina after seeing a short feature she helped publish online about Caleb's search for Eva. The man claimed he worked ground security at JFK back in 2005 and had kept a copy of certain camera reels from that summer. Most were long destroyed by official channels after the mandated 7-year retention window, but Ronelle had saved a few reels out of suspicion. Back then, security procedures had changed rapidly post 9/11, and glitches in system logs were frequent. There were things that didn't sit right with me, he had told Alina. I announced entering but not exiting, or someone showing up with no return scan. It was written off as system errors, but I started saving copies when I could. Now, 2 decades later, he invited Caleb to his home, a cramped apartment near the docks, stacked with old electronics and faded photo frames. Ronelle was in his 60s, but his mind was sharp. I kept the tapes that were weird, he said. Stuff that didn't match the logs. Yours? I think your girl was on one. He handed Caleb an external hard drive, its plastic casing cracked but intact. Caleb stared at it like it might hold his daughter's voice. This is from August 19, 2005, Ronelle said. Arrivals Terminal 4, secondary corridor outside Gate 17. No sound, just footage. But you'll want to see it. They hooked up the drive to Ronelle's old desktop. The grainy video began to play. The timestamp flickered. August 19th, 5:13:42. The camera angle faced the rear hall, near a luggage chute and emergency exit, rarely trafficked. A steady stream of travelers passed by, mostly blurred faces. Caleb leaned in as Ronelle fast-forwarded slowly. Then he froze the frame. A young woman with long, dark hair, carrying a navy blue canvas backpack, stepped into the frame. Caleb's breath caught. That's Eva, he whispered. She was wearing jeans, a green jacket, and holding what looked like a passport. She walked with purpose, alone. For a moment, she paused. Caleb studied her face. She wasn't smiling. She looked tense, wary, but determined. A man entered the frame next. He wore a reflective vest and ID badge clipped to his belt. His cap bore the North Atlantic Skyways logo, but his face was unmistakable. Caleb leaned closer. That's him, he said, jaw tightening. That's Legrand. Ronelle nodded. Showed up a few times that week. We had him listed as a visiting security consultant for the airline. But the badge number he wore didn't match our records. By the time we flagged it, he was gone. In the video, Eva appeared to recognize the man. She moved toward him. They exchanged words. Her lips moved quickly. She seemed upset, but then followed him toward the side exit. A staff-on-low door opened. They disappeared through it together. Caleb sat frozen, heart pounding in his ears. "She never boarded," he said. "She was let out," Ronell nodded slowly. "I tried to report it in at SEP unless subpoenaed." Caleb asked for a copy. Ronell handed over the drive and an older flash stick as backup. "You'll want both. The metadata's intact. It proves she never went through boarding." Caleb left Ronell's apartment and drove directly to a nearby motel. He replayed the footage again and again, memorizing Eva's posture, the look in her eyes, the direction she walked. Then he paused on a frame where Legrand's badge was visible. Zoomed in, the name read, J. Lester, Ground Ops. The ID number was blurred, but not completely. Caleb jotted it down. That night, he uploaded the footage to a private server and sent copies to both Alina and his lawyer in case anything happened to him. The next day, he drove to JFK. He needed to see the corridor in person. The terminal had changed over the years, but Gate 17 still existed. The hallway had been remodeled, but the dimensions were the same. Caleb stood where Etha once stood, trying to imagine her fear. What had Legrand said to her? How did he convince her to walk through that door? Was she coerced or already afraid of something else? Across the terminal, he noticed a plaque on the wall. Terminal 4, Renovation 2012, which meant the internal layout had changed since Eva's time. He requested an archive floor plan from the airport's administrative office under the Freedom of Information Act. It would take a week, but he would get it. As he waited, he began tracking the ID number from Legrand's fake badge. He contacted a retired TSA analyst named Mahir Fadi, who now worked in aviation fraud consulting. Mahir agreed to review the video and confirmed the ID number belonged to a staff member who had quit in 2004. The badge was reprinted with the wrong photo in 2005, Mahir said. That's a security breach. The man in the footage committed identity fraud inside a federal facility. Caleb asked if there was any federal interest in reopening the case. Mahir sighed. Only if a body turns up or someone talks, but what you have is enough to prove your daughter didn't disappear voluntarily. Back in Hamilton Ridge, Caleb reviewed Eva's backpack contents again. On the USB stick inside, a Mentor Hamilton entries, was a short audio file. He hadn't opened it before. Now he did. A soft click, then Eva's voice. "If you're hearing this, I guess you found my things. I'm sorry, I didn't know who to trust. I thought I could get away. Maybe I was wrong. If anything happens, look for the man from the orientation seminar. He wasn't who he said he was." Caleb played it 3 more times, trying to place the voice or context. The orientation seminar likely meant her study abroad briefing, which was hosted by the Eros Foundation. Caleb realized that Legrand hadn't just intercepted her at the airport. He had been watching her for months, grooming the situation, setting it up. Her fear wasn't born at the terminal. It began long before. He opened his notebook and drew a timeline. Eva's last known weeks, the moments that linked them, the journal, the forged paperwork, the boarding pass never scanned, the video, the voice memo. Each added a layer to the truth. She didn't run. She was rerouted. Turned her head. He circled the moment on the tape when Eva hesitated, turned her head. In the reflection of a glass panel behind her, a third figure appeared, a blurry outline. Possibly another staff member, possibly a lookout. Caleb sent the frame to Alina. "Can you enhance this?" She replied, "I'll run it through a friend's software. This isn't random anymore, it's coordinated." Caleb stared at the final frame of the video for a long time. The exit door, the one Eva never came back through. The next move was clear. He would go to Italy. Whatever was waiting beyond that pinned GPS location, he had to follow it. Not because it would give him closure, but because it might give Eva's story something it had never been allowed before. The Italian sky stretched gray and low over the Ligurian coast as Caleb stared out the window of the modest pension in Genoa where he'd checked in 2 days prior. He had come with no appointment, no guide, and no real destination beyond the coordinates embedded in the USB's metadata, tagged from a file labeled Second Staggeree, dated September 2006. Those coordinates led him to a crumbling administrative building near the old port, now repurposed by a humanitarian NGO as a shelter and temporary document center for migrant families. The walls were covered in peeling paint and water damage, but a blue and white banner reading Luz Nuova, Associazione Medica Volontaria, still clung to the front gate. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and tea. A volunteer named Giada, barely 30 and fluent in English, stored in dusty gray folders. Most of our patients from that period were refugees, no ID, no medical insurance, no names we could verify, she said as she thumbed through the files. Caleb provided Eva's name, date of birth, blood type, anything he could remember. Giada squinted at one entry. There was a woman who used the name Elisabetta in late 2006, she said. She had a shoulder injury and was afraid of hospitals, registered under humanitarian care, no passport, but American accent. Pregnant, she was about 20? Giada nodded. Possibly. We tried to transfer her to Tunis when our branch there opened in 2007. The lead nurse at the time, Sister Beatrice, went with her. That night, back in the pension, Caleb stood on the narrow balcony as the wind tousled his graying hair. His thoughts were scattered, a tangle of hope, dread, and endless questions. His phone buzzed, a hidden number. He hesitated, then answered. A beat of silence, then a voice. He backed into the room, heart pounding, hands shaking. He had not heard that voice in 17 years, yet he knew it better than he knew his own. He replayed the moment in his head. Tone, cadence, the subtle inflection on the word safe. He opened a recording app and documented everything he could remember from the call. Background noise. He sent the audio file to Alina with the caption, "Tell me it's her." Within minutes, she replied, "It's her." Voice comparison software put the match at 93%. The next day, Caleb tracked the number. It was a European SIM, registered under a false name but routed through an obsolete network hub in Tunisia. He reached out to a contact in Marseille, Michel Ferrand, a former telecom specialist who now worked with a global NGO. Ferrand analyzed the signal path. The number was bounced through a relay station in Tunis, he said. But here's the strange part. That station shut down 2 years ago. Then how did it make the call? Caleb asked. It didn't, Ferrand said. Someone used an internal satellite emulator. It's military grade, and it only transmits from places with blackout coverage. Someone wanted the call to go through without being traced. Caleb's thoughts spun. Tunis, a nun named Beatrice, a woman calling herself Elisabetta M., and now a voice cloaked in untraceable tech. If Eva had been taken to Tunis, then someone there still had access to her records. Or her. He booked a flight to Tunisia that evening. The old clinic stood behind rusted iron gates and the outskirts of Sidi Bou Said, half shuttered, the windows dusty and broken in places, but the cross still hung above the door. A small garden bloomed around the rear, overgrown but fragrant. Inside, only 2 nuns remained, both elderly. Sister Beatrice had long since retired, they said, but she lived in a private residence nearby. Caleb found her 2 days later in a modest whitewashed home with a tiled courtyard that sang in the afternoon sun. She answered the door in silence, her eyes narrowing behind thick glasses. "You're Eva's father," she said before he could speak. He nodded. Step aside. The sitting room was filled with faded icons and threadbare furniture. On the table lay a sealed envelope. "She asked me to keep this until someone came asking for her," Beatrice said. "She never told me her real name, but I knew she was American. I knew she was hiding." Caleb took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a birth certificate, handwritten French-Tunisian format, father, unknown, mother, Elisabetta Monroe, child, Isa. Date of birth, March 1st, 2007. Attached was a photograph, an infant boy with wide, dark eyes and a seashell necklace looped loosely around his wrist. Beneath it, a letter, written in delicate, looping script. "Dad, if you're reading this, I couldn't say goodbye. I had to keep him safe. They would never stop looking, not after what I knew. Isa doesn't know about me. I told them I died. It was the only way to make him untraceable. I didn't want this, but I didn't have a choice. If you find him, please tell him I was real. Tell him I sang to him every night. Tell him I loved the sea." Caleb sat in silence, the letter clutched in his fist, tears wetting his palms. Sister Beatrice poured tea and waited. "She died?" Caleb finally asked. Beatrice nodded slowly. 3 years ago, a pulmonary infection. She refused to go to the hospital. She passed in the clinic, holding the boy's hand. "Where is he now?" Caleb asked. "He was adopted under protective status, placed through Luz Nuova's Italian program for unclaimed minors. They renamed him, but I kept the certificate, in case this day ever came." Caleb stared at the photo again. Etha, his grandson. Eva's son, a life hidden from the world. A bloodline extended through silence. That night Caleb sat on the beach beneath a violent sky, listening to the waves roll in. Somewhere a boy was growing up with no knowledge of his mother's truth. But that was about to change. He took out his phone and dialed Alien. "We need to find him," he said. "We need to find—" The sun in Tunisia was brutal, even in early spring, and the air in Sidi Bouzid carried the dry salt tang of the nearby sea. Caleb moved with purpose through the narrow, white-walled streets, the envelope from Sister Beatrice clutched tightly in his weathered hand. Inside the envelope were Eva's final words, the photo of Isa, and the birth certificate confirming what he had barely dared to believe. Etha had a child, and she had died to protect him. Caleb's body was tired, but his mind had never felt so alert. The boy, Isa, had been hidden for 16 years, hidden well. And someone had helped her do it. Now he would find him. The information Sister Beatrice gave him pointed toward the local chapter of Luz Nuova, the NGO responsible for placing unclaimed or orphaned children into protective care. Their office in Tunis had been closed down in 2021, but the Atakian branch was still active, and the records, if they existed, would have been processed through them. Caleb knew bureaucracy, and he knew the resistance he would face. But he also knew something else. Names, dates, threats. And after 17 years of silence, he was prepared to push past every door between him and his grandson. Caleb booked the next flight to Milan and took a train straight to the town of Reggio Emilia, where Luz Nuova's European Archive Center was headquartered. The office sat in a converted monastery, tall, cold, and lined with centuries-old stone. At the front desk, a young woman with short black hair and a piercing in her nose greeted him with formal politeness. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "I have a reason," he replied, placing the photograph of Isa and Eva on the counter, followed by the birth certificate. "My name is Caleb Monroe. My daughter died in your care system. I believe her son was adopted through your office." The woman's demeanor shifted. She motioned for him to wait, then disappeared into the back. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, an older man with sharp eyes and a slight limp came to the front. "Mr. Monroe, I'm Marco Lazzari, Director of Records. Please, come with me." Caleb followed him down a quiet hallway to a secure archive room lined with metal cabinets. Marco unlocked one and pulled a file with a red tab. "We had a boy come through under the name Isa Monroe," he said. "Placed in 2007, mother deceased in clinic care, no father listed. He was adopted into a closed family system and relocated for security reasons. The adoptive name is confidential, but—" Marco glanced at Caleb's face. "You've come far, and frankly, I believe you deserve to know." Caleb nodded, unable to speak. Marco handed him a document. It read, "Isaac Morelli, date of birth March 1, 2007. Current residence, Rio Maggiore, Italy. Legal guardian, Lucia Morelli. Riad Major, a seaside town built into the cliffs of Cinque Terre." Caleb had flown over that stretch of coast a dozen times in his years as a pilot, admiring its layered colors from 30,000 feet. Now he would see it from the ground, searching for a boy who didn't know he existed. He took a trail along the coast, the tracks weaving through tunnels and along cliff edges, past green hills and terraced vineyards. The town revealed itself in bursts of yellow, coral, and turquoise, houses clinging to rock like barnacles to a ship's hull. Caleb arrived in the late afternoon and found a small guest house near the marina. He sat on the balcony that night, looking at the stars, unsure of what the next day would bring. The morning came with sea breeze and the smell of baked bread. Caleb walked through the narrow streets, photograph in his pocket, asking gently at cafes and fruit stalls if anyone knew a boy named Isaac Morelli. Most shook their heads. One older woman, tending to a bookstore near the harbor, paused when she heard the name. "Lucia's boy," she said. "Quiet kid, tall. He helps at the dock sometimes, with the boats. Wears a shell necklace. The same one that Eva wore as a girl. The same one that appeared in the photo on Isa's wrist as an infant." Caleb went down to the water and watched. The dock was busy with fishermen and teenagers running supplies. He waited, uncertain. Then he saw him, a boy, no, a young man, maybe 16 or 17, with dark wavy hair and lean arms carrying crates of seafood, with practiced ease. Around his neck, swinging loosely as he moved, was a worn, pale shell, the kind you'd only keep if it meant something. Caleb's knees went weak. He didn't approach. Not yet. He just watched, memorizing the way the boy moved, the shape of his face, the slope of his shoulders, echoes of Eva in all of it. He returned the next day, and the day after. On the third day, the boy sat alone by the rocks, staring out to sea. Caleb approached slowly, heart pounding. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. The boy shrugged. Caleb's sad silence passed between them. Then Caleb pulled out the photo, the one of Eva, age 19, standing barefoot on the beach in California. "This was my daughter," he said. "The afternoon, maybe?" Caleb swallowed hard. "Her name was Eva. She had a son. She left him behind to protect him. I think you might be him." The boy looked up. His eyes narrowed, not in fear but curiosity. "My name's Isaac," he said. "Lucia's my mom." "She raised you," Caleb said gently. "But Eva, she was your birth mother. I'm your grandfather." Isaac didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at the picture again, then down at the necklace around his neck. "She gave up her whole life to keep you safe. She wore it every day until the day she disappeared. She wanted you to have it." The boy nodded slowly, digesting the words. "Did she love me? With everything she had?" Caleb whispered. "She gave up her whole life to keep you safe." They sat there until the sun dipped low and the sea turned gold. Words were scarce, but the bond began forming in the silence. One truth, finally spoken, began to fill the cracks left behind by 17 years of loss. Caleb didn't cry, neither did the boy. But when Isaac asked softly, "Can you tell me about her?" Caleb did. He spoke for hours. The sun hovered low over the Ligurian Sea, casting a warm amber glow across the cliffs of Riamaggiore. The salt-sweet breeze curled through the narrow alleyways, fluttering the laundry lines strung between houses painted in hues of rose, ochre, and aquamarine. Caleb Monroe stood at the edge of the rocks, his boots planted firmly on the worn stone, eyes fixed at the boy sitting just ahead of him. Isaac, or Isa as his mother once named him, watched the tide roll in with quiet intensity, the shell necklace catching the sunlight like a beacon from another lifetime. They had spent the past 3 days in measured conversations, letting truth unfold in fragments. Caleb never rushed him. He knew what it meant to carry ghosts. He knew silence sometimes bore more meaning than words ever could. Isaac had asked questions carefully, sometimes repeating them days later in different ways, searching for gaps, for contradictions, for a lie he never found. Every answer Caleb gave matched what Lucia had told him in fragments. The way Eva arrived alone, half-starved, at the Tunis clinic, under a false name. How she gave birth after 2 days of labor without painkillers. How she never revealed the father and insisted on keeping the baby off the radar. Lucia had loved her like a sister in those final months. She took in Isa when Eva collapsed from fever, delirious but still whispering his name. She told Caleb that Eva's last act was to press the necklace into the nurse's palm and say, "He needs to wear this always. It's his name. It's his home." That was the moment Caleb broke. Not publicly, not with Isaac watching, but alone in his room, he let 17 years of grief fold inward and break free. Now, watching the boy who carried Eva's chin and smile and way of tilting his head when thinking, Caleb understood that he hadn't come to rescue anyone. He'd come to witness the legacy of survival, and now it was time to give something back. "Isa," he said, stepping closer, "I want to show you something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet pouch, the kind used for storing jewelry or time-worn relics. Isaac turned and looked. Caleb handed it over. The boy opened the pouch, revealing a faded airline captain's pin. "The last flight I flew before I retired. I wore this the night I thought your mother boarded her plane. I didn't know then what had really happened, but I wore it the night she vanished. It's the only thing that never left my side since—" Isaac studied it, his fingers brushing the worn surface. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Caleb replied. "Just know that it's yours now. Your story isn't hers, but it began with hers, and I think it deserves to be remembered." They sat side by side on the rocks, the sea stretching infinitely ahead, the sky bleeding into a violet dusk. After a moment, Isaac asked, "Do you think she was scared?" Caleb inhaled slowly. "I think she was brave enough to be scared and still do what she believed was right. That's real courage. She ran because she had to. She gave up everything, me, her life, even her name, so you could have one." Isaac blinked quickly and looked down. "I never felt like I was missing anything," he admitted. "Lucia gave me love. She never lied, but there was always this ache, like something was unfinished." "I had the same ache," Caleb said, "but I think the finish line isn't about answers. It's about connection. We can't fix what happened to her, but we can honor her by living, by remembering." Isaac turned to face him fully. "What was she like when she was my age?" Caleb smiled gently. "She was fire and ocean at the same time. She challenged everything. She hated injustice. She wrote poetry. She never let anyone read. She once shaved half her head because she said she didn't belong in boxes. But she loved deeply. She used to fall asleep in the co-pilot seat when I took her on test flights. Said the sky made her feel safe." Absent's smile tugged faintly at the edges. "I think I would have liked her." "She would have loved you," Caleb said. "I think part of her still does." The sea grew darker as the stars pricked into view, constellations emerging like distant stories written across the cosmos. Caleb reached into his pocket and unfolded a weathered photograph, at the end of which clearly recognized Eva at age 8 holding a paper airplane in one hand and a seashell in the other. "This was her first flying lesson," he said. "She told me once that she wanted to grow up to be invisible, like the wind. She didn't want to be seen. She wanted to be felt." Isaac looked at the image for a long time. "Maybe she got her wish," he murmured. "I never saw her, but I think I've always felt her." Caleb nodded. The waves echoed their rhythm below, quiet and eternal. "There's a lighthouse up the coast," he said. "I've seen it from the air, but never from the ground." "Want to go tomorrow?" Caleb glanced at him, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." They stood slowly, the motion of the sea matching the slow unfolding of something new between them. No title yet, no name for what this was, but it was real. It was theirs. As they walked back toward the village, Caleb noticed Isaac reach up and touch the shell necklace at his throat. The gesture was unconscious, instinctive, the way Eva used to do when nervous or thinking. Caleb didn't say anything. Some truths didn't need to be named. Some echoes just needed to be heard. When they reached the guest house, Lucia stood waiting on the steps. She looked between them, her eyes soft with memory and mourning. Isaac walked to her and hugged her tightly. Then, without looking back, he said, "I'm going to stay a little longer, okay?" Lucia kissed the top of his head. "Take your time," she said. "You have the whole world now." Caleb watched them, grateful. He knew the ache of absence would never fully vanish, but it would no longer be all he carried. It would live beside something else now: acceptance, memory, love. That night, Caleb sat on the same rocky outcrop and stared at the stars alone. He thought of Eva, of her laughter echoing in the cockpit, of her stubborn debates about politics, of the night she disappeared and how his life had split in half. He thought of her fear, her bravery, and of the seashell necklace, now a monument to her choice. The moon slid across the water, casting a silver path that seemed to stretch all the way back to 2005. Caleb closed his eyes and let the night carry him. He felt peace, not the loud kind that comes from justice or vengeance, but the quiet one born from understanding. Eva was gone, but she wasn't lost, not anymore. She had left behind a life, a legacy, a son who now knew her name. In the morning, Caleb and Isaac walked up the cliffs toward the lighthouse, the trail winding through wildflowers and old stone. When they reached the top, they stood at the edge and looked out over the sea, the light circling above them like a heartbeat. "Do you think she can see us?" Isaac asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. "I think she never stopped." They stood together in silence, letting the ocean answer in waves. The sky stretched wide. The past rested gently behind them. The future opened like morning light. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking and subscribing to support more content like this. I'd love to hear what you think about the plot so far. What twists surprised you the most? Also, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Your feedback means a lot.